Module 2, Preparing to Georeference. There are a number of basic questions you should ask yourself when you think you want to georeference a map for your research or teaching. And I've listed out these questions for your reference. You should ask yourself every time, first, how do you want to use the map that you plan to georeference? Secondly, does that use require georeferencing? And third, is the map likely to be capable of being georeferenced? Let me answer these questions in reference to the map that you are going to be georeferencing. This is a wonderful 1722 map by English Captain John Bonner, a sea captain of Boston, Boston during its flourishing early colonial days. It's a wonderful map, chock full of information. Now remember, the first question is, how do you want to use this map? In our hypothetical exercise, my idea is that I want to see how the street pattern in 1722 compares to the street pattern in Boston today, and I also want to see which cultural features, such as buildings or particular land use, may have survived into the present day. These kinds of questions are well suited to georeferencing. So, is georeferencing necessary? Yes. In this case, aligning this map to find out its actual location on the ground is going to be essential for seeing whether street patterns have survived and whether landscape features persist in today's landscape. Another question you need to ask yourself is whether a map is capable of being georeferenced, and there are really 2 points to consider. One is the date of the map. Generally speaking, the older the map, the more difficult it is to georeference it. And this is because in the history of cartography, what we now consider accurate scientific surveying and mapping really didn't begin to get going in Europe and North America until after 1750. So this map is a little early. I might anticipate some trouble. If you go back before the 18th century, it can become increasingly difficult to use georeferencing if you're trying to get accurate results. The second point to consider is the scale of the map. Generally, the larger the scale of your historical map, the better the results are going to be. And you'll remember, for geography, large scale means being closer to the surface of the earth, seeing more detail. Large-scale urban maps, such as this one, tend to be the easiest to georeference. The smaller the scale, the larger the land or sea area that you're trying to georeference, the more difficult it can be. So when you get up to the level of the region or nations or continents, you may run into more trouble with georeferencing. I don't say this to discourage you, but just to give you some pointers to think rationally about this process. The second set of questions that I'd like you to consider have to do with your reference data. Some suggestions for finding good reference data include the following 6 points. First, perhaps obviously, you want to look for the most accurate data you can find. That often means looking for the most recent data, but not necessarily. Any digital data, particularly such things as roads and buildings from within the last decade, are likely to be good enough for georeferencing, but it will depend on the part of the world that you're working with. Secondly, look for data that cover the entire area of your map, or for all of your maps if you plan to georeference a number of maps in a given project. So a little bit of advanced planning, looking at how large an area of the Earth you want to georeference, will help you choose good reference data. This leads to the third point. Consider the projection of your reference data. It may be that one particular projection would be best for your project as a whole. It might be that you could use data with several different projections for several sets of maps, but again, it's a question you should ask yourself. This can often lead to some constructive early planning conversations with geographers or cartographers who you can draw on for some assistance with this kind of more technical question. Number 4, this begins to be the optional area of suggestions. Match your theme if you can. For example, I want to georeference the Bonner map in order to extract the street pattern. That suggests that finding road data, since I want to extract roads, could be very sensible. If you want to study the physical environment from past maps, then finding perhaps topographic maps from the U.S. Geological Survey would be a good choice. 5th point, a single reference layer, such as a single set of roads data, may be easiest to manage, particularly for a simple project. But you should know that you can use many layers for reference in georeferencing. We'll see that when we get to our worked example. And lastly, you should put all of your reference data in a single folder along with scans of the maps you want to georeference.